The second step is actually dividing your life, right? Where is the most plastic usage you want to reduce? Theoretically, people in your kitchen, like I can't live plastic free. I still use plastic in my kitchen. I wear plastic as my retainers. So I tell people divide your space into a living room, kitchen, and bathroom, right? The bathroom is the most easiest space to change out plastic products because the idea is like you're not eating anything in your bathroom. You literally a lot of the bathroom products that we see today, they don't even need to be in plastic. And a lot of people don't even need them. So I think it's really important that when people are doing this, that they take it very slow and they have fun with it too, because that's what's really great about challenging yourself. And instead of buying these like products that may be a lot of money and you don't know how it starts, take it slow, do one swap at a time or one swap every other 2 weeks. I think that really helps people's mindsets to become more sustainable when doing this lifestyle.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Creating a Vegan World. Today we're speaking with Isaias. He's going to talk about zero waste and other topics he's passionate about with environmentalism, veganism, and what this channel is really about, creating system-wide changes to create a vegan world. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much again for having me, Andrew.
Definitely. So can we jump right into it and you talk about like what zero waste is, why you're passionate about it, and how you feel that's a solution for making Earth a better place?
Yeah, definitely. So I would like to preface that in the early 2000s, the Zero Waste International Alliance coined the term about zero waste. And it basically looked about looking into the creation of products being done in a manner that is circular and it does not impact the livelihoods of communities and ecosystems. What ends up happening is that zero waste becomes very heavily popularized in the early 2010s as more of a lifestyle movement, right? Rooted in the idea of living plastic free, right? Reducing your plastic, whether it's in your kitchen, bathroom, or living room. And so when I talk about zero waste, I stem it from an indigenous perspective because in many indigenous cultures, especially an example, I'm going to use this in the indigenous community, the people of Tenochtitlan in Mexico, they created a circular waste system that basically said that natural resources are not used in a linear way. They're used in a circular way, meaning that whatever comes from the earth goes back into the earth. And so this really framework should be applied in the way that we talk about zero waste. I think the issue now is that we're seeing that plastic pollution is become such a huge issue in our environments, right? It's harming the animals. You see the plastic straws on the turtle. You're seeing communities, especially in Asia, having high level rates of plastic. That's because of the global north countries sending them over to Asia. So what we're seeing right now is that plastic itself has created environmental injustice. And so when I advocate for zero waste, it's more rooted in the idea of like how we think about waste systems. So not just thinking about how we're going to make this product circular, but how we're going to create this product that is circular and also sustainable for the people around there. Because what we've seen is that the plastic pollution companies, especially petrochemical industries, are located here in the United States nearby Black and Indigenous communities. These people have high rates of birth defects and they have a myriad of health issues. And so when trying to kind of combat these industries and hold them accountable, these are huge conglomerates that work together with governments and corporations to continue protecting themselves and funneling resources to them. And so I think that when our individual lifestyle has a really great impact, we also shouldn't forget about that system change, because system change is where it gets political. System change is where you're advocating for people's lives and animal lives. And so I think that's, to me, what zero waste really entails.
It's amazing. You mentioned like putting stuff back in the earth where like with the plastics or everything, it just goes to the landfill, it harms the environment. Where there's one company here in Australia, I spoke with an investor in it. And you know, like the saran wrap, the cling wrap that you put above food, like in the refrigerator, they started that type of company, but everything's completely biodegradable. So I see different ways of addressing the problem where a lot of times I realize like consumers at the individual level, it's really difficult to make 8 billion people change. Whereas if we have system level changes like that, that's in place. But I guess at the individual level, more practical sense, what can people do to shift to a zero waste thing? It's like, is it instead of buying beans in like plastic bags, is it like bringing mason jars and filling it up at the store there? What other types of things could people do?
Yeah, I think that the most easiest and the most accessible and free step to do is actually tapping into your lived experiences. Because no matter who you are or your economic situation, we all had sustainability practices instilled in us, whether it was your parents saying, don't throw away that jar, reuse that, please reuse your shoes, wear it until it's over. So a lot of our parents, especially loved ones or cousins, have instilled these practices. And, I also see myself reliving a lot of those experiences where, a lot of the jars that my mom had, she would tell me to reuse them. Or, in college when I had shoes that were wearing out, I would wear them until they were completely discarded, meaning that I wasn't able to wear them. And so I think now, because materials are made so cheaply, they wear out really quickly. And so as consumers now, especially someone in Generation Z and a millennial, we have this throwaway culture. So I say tapping into your lived experiences is the first step. The second step is actually dividing your life, right? Where is the most plastic usage you want to reduce? Theoretically, people in your kitchen, like, I can't live plastic free. I still use plastic in my kitchen. I wear plastic as my retainers. So I tell people, divide your space into a living room, kitchen, and bathroom, right? The bathroom is the most easiest space to change out plastic products, because the idea is like you're not eating anything in your bathroom. You literally, a lot of the bathroom products that we see today, they don't even need to be in plastic. And a lot of people don't even need them. So I think it's really important that when people are doing this, that they take it very slow and they have fun with it too, because that's what's really great about challenging yourself. And instead of buying these like products that may be a lot of money, and you don't know how it starts, take it slow, do one swap at a time or one swap every other 2 weeks. I think that really helps people's mindsets to become more sustainable when doing this lifestyle.
That's amazing. So when it comes to, I guess, like zero waste products, I know a lot of people that watch my channel are entrepreneurs, inventors, people who want to make a difference. So in my mind, I have the creative, like, here's a problem, what's the solution type of thing. So it's like there's plastic toothbrushes, like invented like bamboo toothbrushes or something like that. Do you see like opportunities for inventors and entrepreneurs to create products in the space that could be part of the solution?
Yes, so I think that, and yes, investors play a huge role in a lot of brands, right? Because in order to grow, you need investments. In order to scale your business, you need to have investments. And so I think that I would really hope that investors see it as more as a way to invest, not into what you would say maximum GDP growth, but investing in ethical practices. Because we live in a society that has really artificially suppressed a lot of items to be very cheaply made, is that we're already used to buying cheap stuff. And so I want people to really take the time to understand like why they're investing this amount of money into a product, because you're paying for the land, you're paying for the people, and you're paying for the animals not to be suffering in the supply chain. And so I think that if investors are able to really reckon with that, and consumers actually start to challenge themselves and to start to understand that, buying things ethically will cost money, because we've been grown in a world that has really taught us to be normalizing slave labor in a lot of industries. So I would say that that does take a long shift. At the same time, I think too, it is very weary to be concerned about where those investments are linked to, right? Who is exactly is investing into it and why they're investing it? Because we've seen a lot of the times investment companies or corporations be like, oh, we're working with this organization. This makes us eco-friendly, meanwhile being a large climate polluter. And so really just holding that space to be accountable and have an active dialogue with both consumers, the brands, and investors can possibly create more accountability.
Great. Yeah, you mentioned investors. So speaking with Mark Winstein, I interviewed him on my channel. He started a platform called Vegan Launch, where it's ethical investing, where you invest in early stage startups. So there's new laws in the United States where you don't have to be ultra wealthy. You could be just an everyday person who could invest as little as $100 into different vegan companies. And I've been talking back and forth a lot since our interview. And he said, some companies need help with marketing, but we want to make sure that the marketers are vegan themselves. Number one, they understand like the market and things like that. But the other part is the vegan economy, where something you said triggered this, where like, if the company pays the marketing agency who's not vegan, that goes into non-vegan economy. So really building up the vegan economy is something that's great there. And I guess the other side of the question is asking is like entrepreneurs or creators, like could they invent a new type of toothbrush, a new type of toothpaste holder? Are there specific products that you think need to be reinvented to be zero waste?
I think that when looking at products that need to be reinvented, it's really easy. First of all, like a lot of these tools and a lot of these use items that have been used for so long come from a lot of indigenous cultures. But if you look back into like 1950s or 1940s, when it was heavily plastic free, a lot of the products were never wrapped in plastic. And so like there was actually this image of this like list item, grocery list item that was like a metal lock that had all the lists of like, dairy, milk, eggs, bread, cheese, other things. And, it was a locket where you just like press it down whenever you got it from the grocery store. And after that, you just reset it. And so these are kind of ways that I think that people should be thinking about going back to our roots or looking at other things that have existed and maybe updating them. But I also think too, the way that we define ethical is often very weary, meaning that, a business can be ethical if they're not slaughtering any humans or animals in their supply chain, right? But does that mean that they're actually producing it in a way, or like what are the ways that it's actually doing it? Because a lot of the times, I think when we talk about the vegan economy, we've seen this a lot recently with businesses, and I'm going to say their names, like Oatly, for example, like having the Blackstone investments and then suing a small brand, and then they've been blasted on, and so like looking into these different corporations and asking ourselves like, what are their true intentions? Because there's a difference between saying that you are rooted in sustainability, but there's another difference between saying I'm rooted in low-key profits, but also sustainability is our main way that we want people to understand us. Because at the end of the day, if we're trying to create a world that is ending suffering and it's more sustainable, wouldn't the localization of small-owned brands and businesses be more ethical than supporting large conglomerate businesses that may be holding too much corporate power? And this actually can reflect back into looking into the dairy industry and meat industry, or you see industries like Tyson, for example, being one of the largest meat producers. And so how do we really ensure that there is actually space for vegan entrepreneurship, vegan businesses to thrive, rather than centralizing one vegan business as the main one?
Great. There's a company called Refarmed. It's a Refarmed movement where she's turning, in I think UK and Europe, local dairy farms into plant-based milk production facilities that are just serving their local community. It's like decentralized. Everything is, you want to get like zero waste packaging, and like that's a really amazing thing because it's shifting one big system to all these little local places that don't burn fuel on the way to deliveries as well. So cool. You want to talk more about what's called industrial agriculture? You said that's a big topic that you want to share.
Yeah, so I think that what some of the most understanding concepts out there is that industrial agriculture is one of the largest contributors to greenhouse emissions, most specifically when you look into methane and carbon dioxide emissions. So I think that when people trying to understand like, well, how did we get here and why did we develop industrial agriculture, we have to look into the industrialization era, right? That was a huge boom for economic growth, but we also have to interrogate those questions of like, well, who specifically got rich? Who specifically was making that much money? Because most often not, women and Black Indigenous people of color were the ones actually receiving the less amount during that time. So when we actually are examining industrial agriculture, there is this idea of how it came to development and who was producing it. During, I believe, the end of World War II, Nazi scientists had used a lot of fertilizers and different chemicals into this industrialized system. And so as the United States began to grow more in power and growing more food and land, they invested in different investments into producing more yields of food. And so we designed and we redesigned our food systems to be focused on profitability. So instead of actually serving the American people, it was designed to poison and profit, because the long-term effects of these chemicals usage and pesticides and insecticides created an injustice to these ecosystems, right? It destroyed native species. Now we're seeing a lot of the effects of like our crop yields failing for farmers. And so when we kind of say like, well, who's demanding all this meat and dairy, it is true that yes, American people eat and consume dairy, but that wasn't the case back then. Meat and dairy in a lot of countries was actually very expensive, and it was seen as a luxury, specifically meat. And so now that we kind of are in this system of like, all these large-scale corporations have this much power. They have too much political power into the system. How do we defund them? How do we get our taxes here in the United States divested away from industrial agriculture to make sure that's actually going to like vegan businesses or vegan ranches? It seems like almost an uphill battle. And so I, tell people that this was obviously not by an accident, right? So it didn't mean, it was not it was purposely done for economic and capital growth. And so now I believe the US Department of Agriculture contributes a large percentage to the GDP growth here in America. And so when I tell people that when we're trying to challenge these systems, and especially dismantle them, because I've talked to a lot of animal rights activists that want to get rid of these industries, it is to threaten the economy. Because, and realistically, a lot of the dairy and meat lobbyists are threatening to sue corporations, threatening to sue people, hire police to arrest animal rights activists. And so these are all attempts for them to ensure their, what you would say, their privilege and their power in these spaces. And so I think that when trying to kind of present this anti-capitalist view, I'm saying that at whole, these systems are unsustainable for the environment, people and animals. And so in trying to get people away and trying to localize food systems, that does threaten those corporations, which is why we see this like large scale battle right now with these systems.
Definitely. So I think you kind of answered the question. Do you feel that it's the problem with the system or the people within the system?
Well, I would say that the people uphold that system because of either politics, funds that go into it, right? Because people follow money. And that's one of the realities, right? So in itself, I think a lot of the people that work in dairy and meat industry, especially those lobbyists and politicians, they understand the impacts of it. However, that's their job. And so they have to defend it as much as they want. It's similar if you look at the fossil fuel industries. They were caught lying in a lot of videos and they knew about climate change since the 1980s. So I would say that it is the system itself that was designed to profit and to oppress others, most specifically people and animals, and looking into like Black, Indigenous people of color. So I think it is a system that continuously is designed to exploit and kill others for economic growth.
Definitely. So what do you feel is like the best way for a solution? So there's the system that's not working. So let's give a practical example. Someone making local plant-based burgers that they want to sell to like supermarkets or whatever it is. What's a better approach for going towards that? Could you map that out at like a practical level?
Yeah, so I think before we even talk about grocery stores, we have to also address grocery redlining, because grocery stores, especially these large-scale corporation systems, they're not actually providing access to healthy food for people. That is a lie. There's a term called food apartheid that was coined by Karen A. Washington, a food justice activist. And she said the reason why so many people of color specifically don't have access to grocery stores is because of systemic racism. So in trying to get these corporations to kind of work together with small scale farmers, we have to ask ourselves, who exactly do these systems uphold, and like who exactly are they serving? Because in reality, Whole Foods, right, as much as it has so many vegan options, so many plant-based options, we know that most Americans can't even afford Whole Foods. So I would say that in trying to get people to localize systems, that we also localize food co-ops, food cooperatives, because these are actually ran by the community and the people, rather than waiting for a grocery store like, I don't know, something that's popular here like Target or Food for Less to open up and thinking that that will solve all the issues that people are facing. So we need to also localize those economies to ensure that there is protection for those people.
Definitely. Have you heard of the sustainable city in Dubai, by any chance?
No, actually.
So I just interviewed someone. She works there, and she shifted from the airline industry. She was a flight attendant, I believe, and then works customer service or something there. And she really opened the doors where it's an entire city in Dubai where it's solar panels. It's powered by solar. There's no cars in it. There's like little electronic buggies where you drive through. And I believe when I was looking at a YouTube video, there's like domes in the middle of the city that grow fresh vegetables. And those are distributed to, I guess, people that live within the city for that. So it's a really cool thing on YouTube. It's a sustainable city. And then maybe before I post this one on YouTube, it might be on there on this channel, but it's really cool there. And I love how all of the interviews I'm doing are tying together, where there's a book I interviewed David Simon. He wrote Meatonomics, where he talks about the economics behind the meat and dairy industry. And then I interviewed Emma Hurst. She's a vegan politician for the Animal Justice Party here in Sydney, Australia. So ways to like shift subsidies. And there's a vegan lobbying organization that's starting up in Washington, D.C. So I love how all these solutions are tying together.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess turn this back to you. Other things you want to talk about that you feel passionate about, or I guess if you're picturing my documentary from what you know for it so far, other things that maybe think be important to include for creating a vegan world?
Yeah, I think that really debunking this myth that veganism is a white thing. I think that the reason why so many people online often think veganism is portrayed as white people think is because, and this is social media specifically, and the media has often known to glorify specifically white individuals and putting them on pedestals. And so I think that when we're trying to talk about veganism, that we actually have diverse representation, specifically Black, Indigenous people of color, trans women, women, non-binary folks, femmes, to actually talk about their experiences, because a lot of the time we come from those communities that you're trying to reach to. And so I think that in trying to, create a vegan world, or like trying to veganize, people itself, that we actually ensure that there's diversity and inclusion in these documentaries and series, because most often not, this is what perpetuates and kind of reinforces this imagery that has been doing. And I get a lot of messages about this too from my community members saying that they always think it's a white thing, that they don't see a person of color doing it, they didn't know that existed. And in reality, the data has shown, and you probably read the article, that Black vegans, Black Americans specifically, are the highest rates of vegans going vegan out of any demographic.
Definitely. And even like the economic status of people, that should be represented as well, because sometimes I think it's privilege for wealthy, where in like, I guess inner cities, low income areas where people speak up from that, like how can you go vegan in that area? Where I just talked about food deserts, where there's certain parts of the country where they have to drive like 20 minutes or an hour for like fresh fruits in a grocery store type of thing. So it's really a really good point there. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Cool. And you said anti-oppression. Did you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So I think like with veganism, for me, I see it as an anti-oppression stance with ethics, right? Yes, not consuming any animal products, whether minimizing your usage of clothing, medicine, or other things. Obviously, I always tell people, if you need to take it for medicinal properties or to survive, there's things that obviously we cannot do, right? Veganism is not a purity stance of how far you can go, right? It's more about at least as possible that it's good for your physical, mental health, for you to be able to be a long-term vegan, right? That's what we all want. And so in trying to understand why it's an anti-oppression movement, right? Humans are animals, and animals also are often disregarded because in a specious world that we live in. So I think that when veganism is often presented, you see all these signs of people holding the Holocaust sign and, trying to insert their dominance of you're the reason why animals are dying, portraying this lens of human supremacy. And so for me, I really angle this back and try to not disrupt that anymore, but to disagree and say, this movement itself, what we're fighting against is a larger scale of white supremacy. Yes, can we say that people in themselves consume animals? That is true. However, when we be specific in our language and to address terms like theriocide instead of the Holocaust that describes the killing of non-human animals due to specious actions, we can be better environmental advocates and vegan advocates for this move. And so I think people often think that when we care more about animals, we don't care about human lives. And so I think this is the idea of what intersectional veganism brings, is that we are advocating both for the anti-oppression of humans and animals, right? Meaning that we get to talk about all these other injustices that affect us. And I think that the reason why a lot of Black, Indigenous people of color talk about this specifically is because it's very deeply personal. As an animal right advocate myself, I don't get to opt out of social, racial, environmental injustice. Unfortunately, my whole life I grew up that way. And so those are personal experiences that have affected me and my community. To be able to really not think about these injustices and think about, oh, well, I don't have to go through it, someone else is doing it, is rooted in privilege, is rooted in the idea that you are not actually extending yourself to solidarity to people. And I'm not saying that if you're not doing it, you're not talking about it much, that you're less than. You're more about how do we kind of create this world that is regenerative, that allows us to see both humans and animals equally. However, that's a long-term discussion to have. And I think that in this vegan world, we're so polarized, and we have different types of vegans for different reasons, right? Like you said, we have vegans that were for health reasons, vegans for environmental reasons, vegans only for animal reasons. And so how do we create this world that understands and kind of creates this holistic lens, which I think is often fragmented in this movement?
Definitely. And you're a wealth of information. I love your depth of knowledge? Where do you learn this? Is it through books, YouTube videos, a mix of the above? Is there any like go-to places where like people could get up to speed with the level of knowledge you have on these topics?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say that really YouTube documentaries are really great starts, but I read a lot of books. And in college, actually, I did environmental science. So specifically, that was my major, to look in different environmental sectors, like even the fishing industry, right, with Seaspiracy that came out. And so I think that for me, when I tell people how they want to learn, actually tap into your community, because more often not, the people that you hear in your experiences that are also the same identity or values that hold with you hold so much rich wisdom for you. And I think that also inspires you to share your own thoughts, because I think for so long, often I doubted my ability to be able to speak on things. And so I think now that I'm able to tap into that, I do more reading, I do more discussions with people, have these more critical conversations that can often be uncomfortable. And so I tell people, be ready to be uncomfortable than to be comfortable in a lot of these conversations. And so it's not about being right anymore. It's about just actually assessing the way that we view things and how we can improve our language, how can we improve ourselves, and how can we abolish our toxic mindsets, because that is really the root of why we have so much division in this world.
Yeah, psychologically, it's hard to admit you're wrong. So having that open mindset and learning new things that conflict with your beliefs, that's a great thing. So thanks for this. Is there where can people find more about you? Can you introduce, I guess, what your brand is about? Where can people find you and more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you can check me out at Queer Brown Vegan anywhere on social, from Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and queerbrownvegan.com. I am an educational platform that talks a lot about environmental issues that range from veganism, zero waste, and environmental justice. And you can download my free Eco Learners educational book that I made a year ago with a great friend. So I offer a lot of free resources to specifically students that are trying to get themselves into the environmental field and learn more about how all of these subjects interconnect.
And that free book's on your website. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. I'll put the link in the description on YouTube. So great. Thank you so much for all this information.
Yeah. Thank you so much again.